Hi, this is Michael Williams again here at the Sound Laboratory in Grand Haven, Michigan. Randy French is producing these wonderful videos for us. At least as far as quality, they're wonderful. You'll have to determine whether or not what you're hearing is wonderful. But let me know one way or the other, whether you like it or not. We're going to continue on this subject, predestination. The one thing I can guarantee you is that if you attend church someplace, they've never told you this. They've never told you that everyone who is in Christ was predestined to be there before the foundation of the world. You've not been told that. If you have, please let me know which pastor told you that, which pastor gave you these instructions out of the book of Ephesians with no ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. Please let me know, because we'd like to be in contact with them, because that's somebody who's telling you the truth and reading and letting you know what this says in context. Now, as we continue in this, let me back up just a bit to our last video, to verse 5. Having predestinated us to the adoption of children by Jesus Christ. Now, we've been taught about the adoption. We understand that everyone in Christ was adopted in those terms that is used here. But we know that everyone that is there was adopted to be there in Christ. Now, he says, having predestined us unto the adoption of children by Jesus Christ, according to the good pleasure of his will. So, do you see your will in here? Do you see it at all? Well, here's the fact. The fact is that in the book of Ephesians, Paul is telling us here that not only were you predestined to be in Christ before the foundation of the world, or let me say whoever is in Christ was predestined to be there before the foundation of the world, he's also said that it happened according to God's good pleasure of his own will. You see, your will is not involved, according to Ephesians, in your being in Christ. Does that sound different to you? I know it sounds different to you. I'm glad it sounds different to you, because what we're doing right now is breaking through the darkness of Christianity that has held sway over this planet for 2,000 years to keep people blinded to the honesty of the gospel that's clearly here in Paul's teachings. As Jesus said, was also very clearly here for us before the foundation of the world. So from that point, that's the context in which we should learn. From the foundation of the world to the cross, that something happened that was predestined by God up until that point that would result in you and I being in Christ. God's will, not man's will. You know, when you stop and begin to think about it, it's absolutely foolish to think that man's will could supersede God's will. As I started learning these things, the one thing that I heard as a response to this was that God will never violate a man's will. Oh, really? I think it's just the other way around. God has always violated man's will. Now, when you can say that by one man's sin, all became sinners, God violated the will of the entire human race, because it was not the human race's will to be in sin. It was the decision of one man. Now, this is a very important point, because when you begin to compare between the first Adam and the last Adam, we understand that in the first Adam, that by one man's transgression, all were made sinners. But if this issue of the mystery beginning before the foundation of the world, where did God plan, not get surprised by what man did, but when did God come up with this plan that one man would transgress and he would account that as sin to the entire world? You see, that also would have started before the foundation of the world. Now, I'm surprised. I don't know how surprised you are. This was never taught to me in any church anywhere. I went through Baptist. I went through Pentecostal. I went through every kind of Catholic. Goodness gracious, the Catholics seem to have it the best to me, because when I was Baptist, I had to confess my sins every night before I went to bed. When I became a Pentecostal, I had to confess them every moment of every day. And it seemed like the Catholics only had to deal with it once a week. Now, we went through and explained to you how that even under the old covenant, they had it better than that. They sacrificed an animal and didn't have to worry about sin for another whole year. Are we saying that Christ is no better, in fact, less than the blood of a goat? So far, no religion on earth has it as good as the Jewish people did pertaining to sin, as far as the mind and having to deal with sin. That is just an absolute fact. Having predestined us unto the adoption of children by Jesus Christ to himself, according to the good pleasure of his will. Please note that your will has been left out of this. For what purpose? Now, why would it have been done this way? Why would God leave man's will out of saving man? Because that is what we're saying here. To the praise of the glory of his grace. You see, there is no praise to the glory of God's grace if you had to do something to be redeemed. There is no praise to the glory of God's grace if you had to believe. Oh no, Mike, I was with you up to that point. Don't you know John 3:16? For God so loved the world that whosoever should believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. I know that verse, and I know the ones that follow. We'll get into those in another series we'll be doing soon after this one. To the praise of the glory of his grace, wherein he hath made us accepted in the beloved. Now, the beloved is Christ. So as we get into this, we know that we are accepted to the glory of God and to the glory of his grace, according to his good pleasure, to the praise of the glory of his grace, wherein he made us acceptable in the beloved, in whom we have redemption. Wow. So how did we get there? We got there by the will of God, by predestination, that occurred when? Before the foundation of the world. In whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, according to the riches of his grace, wherein he hath abounded toward us in all wisdom and prudence, having made known unto us the mystery of his will. Oh, remember that? Remember Jesus said that he was here to reveal mysteries to us? The mystery of what will? The mystery of God's will that started, even according to this teaching, before the foundation of the world. Folks, wouldn't it be amazing if you found out that God had all of this worked out through Christ, with Christ, that you would be in Christ before he ever created this planet? That's utterly amazing. I don't know what that does in your heart, but it makes me feel like this planet was created for me to exist in. I did not come out of this planet. This planet came out of me. It came out of you. This planet came out as a result from God to nest us in. I have this picture of a bird building a nest, knowing what was coming and saying, man, I've got to have a place for my chicks. I've got to have a place for the ones that I love. But you see, it was first in the mind of the bird that he was going to have, was going to lay an egg that would produce a chick. It was also then in the mind of God that he was going to have you in him before he ever created the place for you to live. Having made known unto us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in himself. Are you feeling a little left out of the plan? Are you feeling just a little bit left out of the whole thing? That maybe you're just a recipient of God's love and God's mercy and God's grace, and that you didn't have to believe, you didn't have to obey, you didn't have to know? I'll guarantee you, though, knowing will change your life. That you are accepted and loved by God, through the power of God, by the will of God, to his good pleasure, and his alone. Let's read through that. To the pleasure, according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in himself, or predestined. He predestined all this in himself that you would be in him. That in the dispensation of time, or in the whole plan of time, the predestination of time, during the process of the plan, of the fullness of times, he might gather together in one. Now let's see how much is in Christ. That he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. You see, if you're on earth, you have to be in him. You can't be on earth and not be in Christ. I don't care what they told you at the Pentecostal church, at the Baptist church, at the Methodist church. Paul says, if you're on earth, you must be already in Christ. The following verse then says, in whom also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestinated. So you see, we don't change subjects here. According to the purpose of him that worketh all things after the counsel of the way he works together with man's will. Sorry. Wrong. Thanks for playing. This is going to be one thing you're going to be so desperately glad you were wrong about. According to the counsel of his own will, that we should be to the praise of the glory, to the praise of his glory, who first trusted in Christ. You see, we did trust in Christ, but according to Ephesians, we were already in Christ before we ever trusted. Man, I tell you, that makes me trust even more. The will of God, the plan of God, carried out in predestination before the foundation of the world, that you would be in Christ and be holy and without fault and without blame, to the glory of his grace.